Hello. Hi, everyone. It's great to see you. It's quite a big room, and it's half full. I don't know, either people didn't want to move after the confetti talk, or just every Android developer wants to be secretly a backend developer, because my talk is also going to be about kind of the same topic that the previous talk was about, and that's how I learned backend development with Kotlin. And luckily, it's just a lightning talk, 20 minutes, so it shouldn't be long enough to make you fall asleep, but if you do decide to sleep, I think it's a good power nap. So let's start. My name is Lena, and I'm an Android developer. Wait, what? You expected a backend talk, right? OK, let me lower your expectations first. What you're not going to learn during this 20 minutes is how to build a backend from scratch. You will definitely need some more time for that. And if you're interested, I have a series of blog posts about how I built my first backend. And it's about 10 blog posts, but it will take you some time to read through it. This talk will also not motivate you to switch your profession to backend development, because that stuff is really complicated, and they also have no UI, so no fun with Jetpack Compose. As the title says, I will give you a brief overview about my experience building a backend in Kotlin for the first time. And this talk also has an alternative title. So I will tell you about how I got started, what tool I chose, and why I think it's a great skill to unlock. So how did I get here, and why did I decide to try backend development in the first place? Wasn't I satisfied with my regular Android developer job? You know, there is so much interesting stuff in software development that you don't get to play with at work. And then I guess, like most of us, I thought of creating a pet project. But my history with pet projects started some time ago. And the first project that I had was back at university when I just started Android development, and it was a vocabulary builder. I think many of you tried building a vocabulary app sometime in a lifetime. Clap your hands if you're one of us. No? OK, maybe one day I will get more claps than that. So I didn't know anything about backend development back then. And I heard things about HTTP and stuff, but I didn't know what it had to do with mobile development. So I tried being quite inventive, and in my vocabulary app, the backend was local. I had a TXT file saved in the assets folder, and then I would import it into shared preferences, and I would refresh them every time when the words count changed or when the user learned a new topic. And days went by. I dipped my feet in web development, tried a bit of Node.js, then built a small backend in Dart for a university project. And then I finished university, got a job as Android developer, and never had to deal with backend development anymore. But so after this point, I was only building Android apps and comfortably consuming APIs or sending requests with Retrofit and Ktor. But one day, I decided that I want a new pet project. And as I was working quite a lot with KMM back then, the app part was rather clear to me. I would use Ktor for networking, Coin for dependency injection, and the UI will be in Swift UI and Compose. But I still needed data. I needed a backend. And my experience so far, as I told you, was either with Node.js or with another Dart framework. So I started building my backend in Node, and I soon realized that I'm quite bad at JavaScript. I mean, I could follow basic tutorials and build a simple server, but once I needed custom logics, things got quite complicated and it felt like a drag, and I didn't really feel like mastering JavaScript. I still wanted to stay a Kotlin developer. So I thought I built Android apps in Kotlin, and I use KMP to build iOS apps. Why not build a backend with Kotlin? Of course, I didn't want to jump on it right away. Even though I was bad at JavaScript and backend, I did have some experience with Node.js and Dart, and I didn't want to just throw away all the time that I spent learning those things. That's why I decided to compare my options and research what Kotlin backend development options there are. The rest of this talk I will tell you about what questions I had and what answers I found. First question that I asked the community was, is it reasonable to start learning backend with Kotlin at all? Maybe there is something else that I can try. I've heard good feedback about Go, for example. Or should I rather leverage my Java knowledge and go for Java frameworks because they're more mature? Also, having worked a lot with KMP back then, when it was in alpha, I was a little bit apprehensive about the experimental nature, and I wasn't sure how happy I'd be learning something new, backend development from scratch in that experimental mode. The answer to these questions can be summarized as in one sentence. Kotlin is awesome, and why try Java or Go if you can have it all in one language? If you're an Android developer, this will make a lot of sense to you, and at least for me, it was quite convincing, so I decided to start building my backend in Kotlin. My concerns about the experimental nature of things were kind of justified. It wasn't as easy as copy-pasting some Node.js tutorial project code, and sometimes it was annoying to keep up with the change in major versions. But on the other hand, there was the magic of KMP, which made up for it. The biggest advantage of having a Kotlin-based server is naturally the code sharing, and I could have a separate module in my app with the models and networking interface that I could share with my backend module and my common module. And if I wanted to build a web app in the future, I would share it with you too. And what's more, there is a number of frameworks and toolkits that you can go with. Now you must be wondering what options are there and which did I choose. My initial thought was simple: which framework is the easiest for a beginner? Kotlin Spring probably benefits from the maturity of Java Spring, but I have seen and heard more about Ktor developments recently. Also, using Ktor on the client side in KMP may facilitate the learning process, learning backend with Ktor. Or maybe there is something else out there that I should try. Let's take a look. Ktor seems to be quite a popular beginner option, and this was exactly what I went with in KMPizza, in my pet project. So far, I've had a lot of positive experience with it, and even though it's actively being developed, it's very easy to use. So about a minute ago, I complained about learning materials or the lack of it, and to some extent, it was also true for Ktor. But on the other hand, there was documentation, and that documentation was crystal clear. So even migrating to new major versions wasn't big of a deal. And the person who wrote documentation for Ktor did a really good job. Another widely used option for backend development in Kotlin is the Spring framework. and it's especially popular in corporate environments. So if you're seriously looking into switching your domain to backend development and continue doing it professionally in the future, then learning Spring may be a good idea and could give you a competitive edge. Ktor has a huge benefit of being simple and easy to learn, but Spring, on the other hand, is a full-blown modularized tool for everything. Moreover, there are other Kotlin-based frameworks and toolkits for backend development besides Ktor and Spring. By no means it's going to be an exhaustive list, and I haven't tried any of them, but here's what I found out. Micronaut is a Kotlin-compatible framework. It's less supported than Spring, but it's rumored to perform better and have shorter startup times thanks to their reimagined memory consumption concept. Vertex is a toolkit, it's not a framework, and it's good for building reactive systems using an asynchronous model. Its ecosystem are just jar files that you can use just like any other library. You just place them in your class path, and you're done. And as a toolkit, it doesn't provide you with an all-in-one solution, but it gives you those building blocks that you can use to customize your own. Hexagon is another toolkit. It's Kotlin first, written in Kotlin for Kotlin users, and it also has server applications as its sole purpose. It focuses on simplicity, clean architecture, and has good documentation. I checked it. And HTTP4K is another HTTP toolkit written in Kotlin. Similar to other toolkits, if you want to go beyond the basic core functions, you have to look for libraries. For example, it doesn't have ORM, but you can integrate JetBrains exposed. And on the good side, you can use whichever libraries fit your case the best, but you have to spend some time looking for libraries that will work well together. As you can see, there are a lot of options to go with, and which one you choose depends totally on you. It depends on how easy, how flexible, and how well supported you want it to be. But now that you've made your choice, you've chosen your framework or your toolkit, how do you actually start using it? Or how did I do it? For me, the easiest way has always been learning by doing. So I chose Ktor, and I just started building my project. Little by little, I learned how to build it up, and I documented it in my blog. And my experience can be summarized in 10 steps. I will quickly run you through them. And don't worry, the code snippets there aren't for you to memorize or fully understand them. They're more of a visual aid. So I started with creating a KMP project, which is quite easy nowadays with the KMP plugin. In this step, you create your basic starter project, which is divided into Android, iOS, and Common. And you'll also have the basic setup for your UI. But of course, you can extend the project with other modules, for example, Backend. And that was exactly my next step. I added a Backend module to the starter project, which was automatically added to the settings Gradle file. And this Backend module became my playground for all my Backend experiments. As I went with Ktor, I had to add Ktor dependencies to my Backend module's Gradle file. And after that, I could set up a basic server. I used Netty and loaded configuration settings from a config file. With Ktor, you can configure various server parameters, like, for example, the deployment port. Of course, I wanted my server to actually do something, so I implemented my first routing function, which returned a simple, boring hello. By then, I was very excited to try it out, because teaching yourself software development always leaves room for surprises or disappointment, and what if it doesn't work? So to test my server locally, I learned how to create a package with ShadowJar plugin. So I built it, ran it locally, and it worked. Seeing that boring, simple hello was already quite rewarding. Next challenge was preparing a database that stores all my recipes, because the project was about pizza recipes. I went with JetBrains Exposed ORM framework coupled with PostgreSQL, and I added all the dependencies first, then I created the necessary tables and entities. After defining the relationships between the variables, I used those to create entities and transform them into classes that we will later use for my KMM apps. This was probably the most difficult part for me, and it still is, because I've always found database management super complicated, and if I could travel in time, I would travel back to my past me, tell her to watch the talk that Hadi Hariri gave yesterday, and that would have made it a little bit easier. After preparing everything, I had to set up a Postgres database. Then I created a local source implementation so that I could connect it to the REST API. And also I had to specify some more configuration parameters like driver or pool size. Then I connected it all together by injecting the local source in the server. And for that I use Coin. So the same Coin which I normally used for my KMM apps for dependency injection, I could use it for my backend, and it was quite a nice surprise. Then I added more useful endpoints to my backend, like get recipes or add recipe. Otherwise, it would have been too boring. At this point, I had to add serialization and install some plugins, like content negotiation for Ktor, so that I could actually send the objects back and forth between the server and the client. And I tested my backend locally, and then also really with a post recipe request this time. And then I requested all the recipes back, and I saw my newly posted recipe. That was very exciting. And as a cherry on top, I decided to add images to my app. I implemented image hosting with Amazon Web Services. First, I added an Amazon file storage class, where you need to implement the save function and have the object request. And then I injected that class in the local source, of course, using Coin again. Also, I had to adjust the database to have the recipe image table and a corresponding entity. And finally, I wrote another route to add a recipe image. In that function, we receive the image file from the client, and then we transform the par data to the file type so it can be accepted by the clients. And if there is an error, then we just throw an exception. When uploading the image, it would be sent from the client in multi-part form data. This way, I could use such mouth-watering pictures like this. And finally, I deployed my backend. First, it was on Heroku, and then I moved it to Fly.io, and I could happily use it for my KMM apps. So far, you've been patiently listening to my story, and my motivation for learning backend was my pet project. But what if you don't need a backend for your project, or what if you rely on public APIs? Why do I think it's still a good thing for an Android developer or a mobile developer to learn backend? In another speech on KMM, I mentioned that KMM needs multi-platform developers. Being a multi-platform developer means having a certain set of skills and tools. Not that those are required, but they're nice to have, and it's good to be a versatile developer if you're dealing with KMP. I can compare acquiring new skills in different programming domains to speaking different foreign languages. You can use an interpreter or Google Translate if you wish, but life gets simpler if you can communicate directly. It's much easier to explain to a backend developer what you want or what's your problem if you've already dipped your feet in backend development yourself and you know how it works behind the scenes. What I forgot to mention at the beginning is that we're going to play a little game at the end. It's going to be a small brain teaser for you. Let's use that muscle a little bit. And I also want to see if I manage to catch your attention and persuade that you should try backend development. So there will be some sentences that you can complete. Just try thinking how you'd fill in the gaps. Let's go one by one. You can shout out your version if you have one, or I'll just do it myself. So becoming something mobile developer, it's good to have other KMP-related skills. And sorry? Almost. That will be a little bit later. Multi-platform, yeah. Becoming a multi-platform mobile developer, it's good to have other KMP-related skills, such as, I already heard the right answer, such as backend development, because it serves every front-end platform. The next one is that it will not only make you grow professionally, but also contribute to, this one is a bit more complicated. To what? Maybe, but that's not what I'm expecting. It's something about your projects. It will not only make you grow professionally, but also contribute to something of your projects. Not really. To the quality of your projects. And the last one, as I've just said, it will facilitate, sorry? Yes, great. It will improve inter-team communication because it will facilitate your communication with backend developers and other developers. So to sum up my speech, KMP is not only about mobile apps. The biggest advantage of KMP is that you can do everything. You can build websites and desktop apps, and Kotlin doesn't only work for Android, as many might think. You can build microservices, you can build a backend for your app, and I think you should try. Thank you.